Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Tanks with the mighty Jingles. In today's video we're going to be featuring one of the most beloved vehicles in the entire game. And when I say the most beloved vehicles in the entire game, I mean that in the absolutely detested by anybody who has to play against them sense of the phrase. This is Honoured, from the Odin Mortis clan, in the premium Tier 8 French armoured car, the Panhard Ebr 75 FL10. This thing did actually exist. The Panhard armour car had exactly the same size turret ring as the AMX-13 tank, and it was very easy to fit these things with an AMX-13 75's turret. They were actually deployed with the French army. Oh, careful on it, watch where you're driving. Yes, they were deployed with the French army in Algeria and deployed by the Portuguese in their colonial wars in Angola, Mozambique and Guinea. This thing is exceptionally fast. In fact, along with the Lynx, it's the fastest thing available at Tier 8 with a top speed of 80 kilometers per hour, forwards and in reverse. And it's armed with a two-shot autoloader 75mm gun that has a very, very fast intra-clip reload. Now, if you don't play World of Tanks, and you haven't figured out just from the first minute of watching Honoured play this thing, why exactly it is that these armoured cars are so universally hated, allow me to explain. Let's just put it into some context for you. Does everybody remember the T-52? Tier 5 Russian light tank. It's a tank that has a certain amount of nostalgia value. It's fondly remembered by those who used to drive it, and it's absolutely hated by everybody, particularly heavy tank drivers who used to have to fight against it. It was in fact even reintroduced into the game as a Tier 6 premium, I believe, last year as some sort of anniversary gift. The thing is, the all-new reintroduced premium Tier 6 version of the tank was just a pale shadow of what it had been at Tier 5. Not because of the stats of the tank being particularly different, but because the game has moved on a lot since the tank was originally removed from the tech tree. I have many fond memories of back in the day, in the original T-50-2, circle strafing helpless T-29s at 72 kilometers per hour, and they were just incapable of even pointing their guns in my direction, let alone managing to hit me. But those days are long gone. Wargaming eventually removed the tank from the game because it was hilariously brokenly overpowered. But at the point at which it was removed from the game, its ship had already sailed because of the introduction of physics. It was still possible to career around the map at breakneck speeds, but the second you tried to turn a corner, the tank would just flip and roll over. In fact, a lot of the time, even if you were driving in a perfectly straight line, or at least trying to, at the speeds that tank was capable of driving, if you just hit a bump in the road, you would flip and roll over. Well, the years went by, and then these French armoured cars were introduced into the game, and overnight Wargaming had taken 2 steps back right to the stupidly, brokenly overpowered gameplay mechanics of the T-50-2 before the introduction of physics into World of Tanks. Except better. And when I say better, I of course mean worse in every way imaginable for everybody except the people driving them. Remember, the T-50-2 was removed from the game by Wargaming in order to bring some kind of semblance of fairness and balance to random battles. It's not unusual to hear people, when referring to overpowered machines, to describe them as defying the laws of physics. Usually that's just an exaggeration made to drive the point home, but not in the case of these things. Remember, the T-50-2 was pretty much solidly nerfed with the introduction of physics, which caused the tank to flip if it attempted to perform any kind of manoeuvre at its top speed of 70 kilometers per hour. Well, this thing has a top speed of 80 kilometers per hour, and when was the last time you saw one of them flip over when performing a high-speed manoeuvre at ridiculous breakneck speeds? No, they don't, do they? That's because they actually do flout the laws of physics. Wargaming, of course, realised that if you're going to put something into the game that's as fast and manoeuvrable and lightweight as one of these things, it's going to need substantial assistance to ensure that those wheels stay in contact with the ground. And so they, well, basically gave them all a sort of built-in cheat mode. I'm not making this up. That defies the laws of physics and ensures that it is extremely difficult, no matter how hard you try, to actually flip one of these things over. And that's not all. Because this is a wheeled vehicle and not a tracked vehicle, and while the T50-2 was exceptionally annoying, if you could hit it, which wasn't easy, but if you could hit it, there was an excellent chance you were going to immobilise it by blowing its tracks off. A problem experienced by all light tank drivers. Well, that doesn't happen with this thing. In fact, Honoured here has already had some of his wheels blown off a couple of times during the course of this battle. Did you notice? No, of course you didn't, because all that happened was that he slowed down to a mere 70 kilometers per hour. And there's another thing that we should probably mention about the wheels on this thing. They seem to be extraordinarily good at absorbing large caliber armor piercing shells without actually causing any damage to the tank and without really slowing it down appreciably either. In fact, if you go to the World of Tanks wiki page and read the entry on this machine in particular, and again, I'm not making this up, allow me to find the quote for you. The wheels often absorb shots, and they work as a quite effective armour. When expecting to get shot, try to expose the sides. It actually tells you, in defiance of everything that you've learned from playing every other type of vehicle in World of Tanks, it actually tells you that when you're expecting to get shot at, try to expose the sides of the tank. Holy shit. And finally, yes, there's more. Hard though it may be to believe, you may not have actually noticed, thanks to the daredevil manoeuvres and breakneck speeds that Honoured has been pushing this tank through over the course of the last few minutes, but around about half of the time, he's actually been driving this tank in reverse. Yes, I know. Yes, the T50-2, which, remember, was removed from the game for being stupidly fast and manoeuvrable. It certainly had its haters, but it tended to stop when you shot it. It only had a weedy little 57mm gun, although the penetration was okay and the rate of fire was ridiculous. It also tended to flip and roll whenever it hit a slight obstacle, and the best it could manage in reverse was not much more than 20 kilometers per hour. And now we've got these things. And oh, look! There's another tank that caused a little bit of a fuss when it was introduced. The Chrysler Grand Finals. Although the problem with that thing was that its frontal armour was ridiculously good and basically unpenetrable unless you were firing gold ammo at it, and its gun was so bad that it couldn't really penetrate anything else unless it was also firing gold ammo. Basically, it was a tank designed to sell gold ammunition. But who's still complaining about the Chrysler Grand Final today? Yeah, exactly, nobody. These things, on the other hand... Light tank drivers, are you sitting there asking yourselves, why do I even exist? What is the point in even playing anymore when these things exist? Have you noticed that when it comes to light tanks these days, the most successful and popular light tanks tend to not actually be light tanks? Certainly at higher tiers anyway. Machines like the T49, which isn't really a light tank, it's just a stripped down high-speed version of the KV2. Machines like the LT432 and the T54 lightweight, which aren't really light tanks, they're just stripped down medium tanks. The T54 in the case of the T54 lightweight, and the T64 in the case of the LT432. Yeah, funny that, isn't it? So what exactly is it that balances these things? Because it's certainly not the game mechanics or the vehicle statistics. And yet I do feel that these things are balanced, although that may be very hard to believe from the replays that you may have seen, including this one, on YouTube. People often say, well, anybody can have a monster game driving one of these things, it's easy. Yeah, but it isn't easy. And no, not everybody can have a monster game driving one of these things, because if you put a bad player into an EBR75, he's still going to be a bad player. These things are balanced around player skill, because they're not easy to drive. Well, Okay, they are easier to drive than the T50-2 was after the introduction of physics, because these things just laugh at the laws of physics. But they're still not easy to drive. They have a very high player skill cap. I think, and I obviously have no statistics whatsoever to back this up, but my feeling is that the majority of players would probably be worse in one of these things than they would if they just stuck to a light tank, because these things drive very, very differently. You definitely have to have much better reactions in order to drive one of these things successfully, and then there's the whole driving around in reverse thing as well, which is not an intuitive thing to do. Now what that of course means is that in order to be good in one of these things, you have to be a pretty good player in the first place. Most players simply aren't equipped to get the best out of these kind of machines, and their performance in them is no better, and in some cases worse, than if they'd been driving an equivalent tier light tank, in which they would probably be performing equally dismally. But a good player, on the other hand, somebody who has the reactions, experience, and ability to get the most out of this outrageous machine, well, it's perhaps not surprising to see them doing as well as they do. Players like Honoured here, for example, from the Odin Mortis clan, one of the oldest and most respected clans on the EU server, would almost certainly be able to do very well in just about any tank that he chose to turn his hand to. But you give him a machine like this, and yeah, well, is it really any surprise that if you take some of the very best players and you give them some of the very best machines, that they do very, very well indeed? It's kind of like taking a squad of 10 soldiers, 8 of whom are conscripts who only have a week's training and haven't even been taught enough to know that it's a good idea to put their pants on before their boots when they get out of bed in the morning. The other 2 are US Navy SEALs. You arm all of them with M249 squad automatic weapons and send them off into battle. Somewhat predictably, they suffer an 80% casualty rate. All of the conscripts die. Equally predictably, the 2 US Navy SEALs survive, and not only that, they manage to single-handedly, or double-handedly because there's 2 of them, wipe out an entire 10-man enemy squad. Now you might think, and you'd be right, that there's a statistical anomaly there in what happens when you give an all-singing, all-dancing new weapon systems to 2 people who actually know one end of the weapon from the other, but at the same time you could point to the overall statistics of everybody equipped with that weapon and say that it's still perfectly fair and balanced, since a squad equipped with them suffered an 80% casualty rate. And you wouldn't be lying, because it's all in how you spin the numbers, isn't it? Yeah. Well, anyway, Honoured, well done. You may have been playing an outrageously broken machine, but you did play it exceptionally well. So my congratulations to you on a great result. Everybody else, I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.